has been sort of a hallmark of most of the long session as well. What to be is no more, as you have heard from some of the newer folks in the legislature. What will be is has a pretty big question mark. I am Susan Fisher. I represent District 114 in the North Carolina House. I have been doing so for the last 4 sessions. I'm running for a 5th term, 4 terms I mean. I'm running for a 5th term. I am blessedly unopposed and hope for a landslide. So many of the Chamber's issues are all of our issues. Even if you're not a member of the Chamber, issues like education belong to all of us. And as you know, in order to build the workforce that we're going to need to run these small, medium, and large businesses in the New Belgiums that are coming into this area, we're going to have quality schools. Dropout rates have fallen because of the work of legislators that have gone way before I even got there. But partnerships like communities in schools, public-private collaboration, those are the things that are important. If we look at just, think for a minute, if state government starves our children of good public schools or of really well-qualified and well-paid teachers, what will that do to our small, medium, and large businesses? I don't want to think about that. If we begin to look only at personal grudges, at personal gain, at private gain over what could benefit the community as a whole, then we will have nothing but mediocrity. And neither can we expect anything but flat, one-dimensional communities if we try to rob their citizens of their rights. Now, I know I'm speaking a little bit out of school here today, but these are all things that are of concern to us and that affect the business community. I have to say that Jeff and his staff and all the people at the Chamber have done some really good planning, because you planned this event to take place during the first week of early voting. I think that was prime. Good work. So, no, I don't know what will happen in the short session, because it's a brand new day. But I do know that we all need to vote for people who will not exclude the most creative minds from the community in which we live, and for people who believe in the collaborative public-private approach to issues for the good of the whole of Asheville, Buncombe, and this entire region. A good way to begin to send that message during this early voting time that we're in is to vote early and vote against Amendment 1. I want to thank the Chamber for providing this opportunity every year and for making it happen at such a good time this year. And I look forward to serving you for years to come. It's been my honor. Thank you very much.
Representative Patsy Keever.
Well, thank you very much. I do appreciate this opportunity. And I would say, unlike Senator Heiss, this was my first term, and I was on the back row. And I was on the back row on the Republican side, so that was especially interesting. And I would say that this was my first term, and it will be my last term, since I was double bumped with Susan Fisher and chose not to run against her, because that would be a stupid thing to do for all of us. So I will be running for Congress. If anybody in the 10th District has a vote out there, I would appreciate it. But what I'm here today is to talk to you about my role as a legislator. And I will say, well, one of the most exciting things I've done lately was go to the opening of the New Belgium, the announcement of the New Belgium coming here to Asheville. That was a lot of fun. I was so impressed with the people involved with New Belgium and their attention to the environment and to the way they treat their employees and to wanting to do bike paths and greenways. So it was a perfect match, and I applaud all of those people. I know it was a huge team of people that worked to bring New Belgium here, and Sierra Nevada, Chuck. But I was excited about New Belgium because I was there. In the news just yesterday, we had some good news and some bad news, depending on which side of the issues you were on. The COPA issue with Mission Hospital and the water issue. And what I would say about those is the good part of both of those issues, whichever side you're on, is that there was so much citizen activation on them. I got letters on both issues, mostly on one side of both issues, some on the other side. But there was a lot of citizen activity, and that's what government is about. And that's why we are in Raleigh or Washington or wherever to represent you. And so please understand that it is your responsibility to do just that, to communicate with your representatives at whatever level, because it makes a difference. It does make a difference. In the short session, I can't tell you either. I was a freshman. I was on the minority side. I have no clue what's going on in Raleigh. I was not appointed to any interim committees, so I haven't been in Raleigh. I was planning to go on Monday, but I understand it's just a skeleton session, and we were asked not to go. Speaker Tillis has promised there will be no votes, and so I've decided, okay, I won't go. So I'm hoping, I'm trusting that he put that in writing. I'm trusting that there won't be any attempts to override. I would like to speak briefly to the Chamber's 5 points that they want to do. Job creation, of course. We all want to do the best we can to get jobs into our region, and I'm very proud of that. The second one, regulatory reform. The word I liked best there was balance. Just because we have some environmental regulations does not mean that we have to do harm to our businesses. That balance is extremely important. The third thing, the tax reform, I'm all for that, and to broaden the tax base, I think, is an important thing for us to look at. Number 4, examine the unemployment trust fund. I have to say I don't have any idea what you're talking about. And number 5, support for education, and you mentioned early education. That excited me because, ladies and gentlemen, the first 5 years of a child's life are the most important formative years that child will ever have. If we want to produce adults who can have jobs and pay taxes, we've got to start when they are very, very young. So I applaud the Chamber's attention to early childhood education. And Tom, you were talking about something new is rolling out in K-12. Please remember pre-K-12. And Jeff, you're raising your hand at me? I'm done. I'm out of here. Thank you so much for the opportunity to serve you once. I hope I can serve you again at the national level. Thank you so much.
And from some earlier discussion, fellow Eagle Scout, Representative Tim Moffitt.
My name is Tim Moffitt. It's good to be back here. I think I missed last year, so I remember vividly the first time I spoke to you, which was 2 years ago. But just want to clarify one thing. I was not shirking my duties and failing to be at that committee meeting on time. I was actually chairing another committee. I was on the calendar first, and I had to finish that meeting before I could go to the Unemployment Fraud Task Force, which I agree with Trudy. We have uncovered some fascinating things, and as an employer, I see a lot of these things that go on, and you ask yourself the question, why? Well, now we're getting to the core of that, and we hopefully will have some positive things for that. I think we can get something in the short session, but it is going to be an ongoing effort that I do see as a several-year work in the process. But how do things work in Raleigh? I want to share a quick story I think most of you will appreciate. if you followed the budget battle last year, it was a very tense period of time in the state General Assembly. My first rodeo, so I really wasn't sure what to expect. Martin graciously tried to mentor me early on. I think he's given up. Susan tried as well, and it's you did. I still have the note. But we see things differently. But there's a side story that I want to share with you. The Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation created a state system of what they call the National Assemblies of Sportsmen's Caucuses, of which I'm proud to be the state chair for the Sportsmen's Caucus in North Carolina. Incidentally, I did pick up the Heritage Award for having the best Sportsmen's Caucus in the Southeast last fall. But during the budget battle, I had scheduled a skeet shooting competition that was, or just happened to be toward the end of the budget battle. And we were going to go out as a collaborative body and have loaded guns and go around a skeet shooting course in the Fuquay Arena and really talk about sportsman related issues around hunting, fishing, and really some of the first line of liberty things that we pay attention to on the sportsman's side. But that particular day was a lengthy day, and I'll never forget that, you know, our side would do something, because this was going to be a competition, one side versus the other. So I know our side would do something, and we could not believe the reaction from the other side. It was incredible. The gnashing of teeth, I mean, just the loud voices, the wagging of fingers, the opposition that went back and forth, and then they would do something, and we would be the ones gnashing our teeth and indignant about what they had just recommended. So here I am thinking during this long debate on the floor, okay, we've got this event tonight, yeah, should we change from skeet shooting to maybe fly fishing? Because it's really not going to be an environment tonight that's going to be the most conducive for camaraderie and collaboration because of all this that's going on. But I decided that we would continue with that on the calendar. So we got finished, and as I was riding out to the skeet shooting range, I was still pretty concerned. But when we got there, we had a good time. And what most of you are probably thinking is that this was Democrats versus Republicans. It was actually the Senate versus the House. And one thing that I learned early on is that the folks in the House on the other side of the aisle are just the opposition. It's the Senate that's the enemy. That's how things work in Raleigh. Like most of you here, I am a business owner. I've been a business owner for I was trying to count the years, and I age myself every time I do that. But I've had employees for 22 years. I've been a management consultant for 27 years. And I think that one's background affects the way that they approach crafting legislation. I think it's important. I have my differences with people on the floor of the House, and they have their differences. And I think our background really folds into the way that we see things. And it doesn't make one person right, one person wrong. It makes us different. It makes us unique. And in large measure, we get a real chance to work together and solve problems that are pressing locally or that are pressing statewide. But we are going to have instances where we just do not agree. And I think that's when civility and courtesy, take front row, and we collaborate as best as we can. But when it comes to crafting legislation that's meaningful, the New Belgium, which has been referred to a few times, that was something that was exciting. That was very meaningful, and I certainly enjoyed that. But I did want to point out, just for the record, that Chuck's involvement was really in tasting, and mine was involved in crafting the legislation. He was very good about checking in with me, wanting to know how it was going. And I said, great, how's it tasting? He said, oh, it's incredible. I wish I could have recorded a few of those phone calls, but that's beside the point. But it is something that was meaningful for our area. And one thing that I need to get across to you today is that this is my home. Born and raised here. I've been here my entire life. I'm an employer here. You're going to hear in the fall that I created no jobs. Well, I've hired 5 people this year myself, so that's 5 right there. But we're going to run into a very difficult election cycle. But I think it's important to remember that we all want what's in the best interest of our community. And I think ultimately we want the best outcomes. We just have different approaches to getting there. And sometimes that doesn't make a lot of sense to those people that are outside of the General Assembly bubble. But we're all very approachable. As Tom Apodaca mentioned earlier, if you have any local issues that need to be addressed, call the Senate and they'll get right on it. The House always tries to work as best as we can with the Senate and keep them in line. But when it comes to what's most important to us, it's you guys. And as evidence today, you're in good hands. We're out of session. And when we're out of session, that's when you can feel the most certain that nothing bad's going to happen. Thanks for letting me do that.
I guess now in self-defense, Representative Chuck McGrady.
Thank you. I'm not sure I can stand any more shout-outs, my colleagues. I do appreciate this opportunity to be here. I particularly appreciate the recognition the Chamber did of our work on the whole set of alcoholic beverage issues related to New Belgium and Sierra Nevada. I did go to California and drink a fair amount of beer, but I also was in Raleigh while that was going on. And I think the thing that I learned from that, I mean, 2 years ago, somebody had told me I was going to go to the General Assembly and my specialty would be alcoholic beverage law. I would have laughed. But in fact, a lot of that occurred this past year, first with a little microbrewery issue that Tom Apodaca said would be a cinch, and turned out to be one of the closest votes we had in the House, and then Sierra Nevada coming along. But what I learned from both of those is something about our area that I've said for a long time, and that is neither of those companies would have come to Western North Carolina but for the quality of life that we have here. And that really is going to be my focus. I mean, if it was all about incentives, I have an expectation that both of those companies would have been somewhere else. But they were impressed, I know, by the fact that when they ran into a roadblock, the North Carolina delegation from the West took care of it in record time. And that wouldn't have happened in California or Colorado. We, despite our policy differences on occasion, need to continue to focus on what is the quality of life in Western North Carolina. And I've learned a lot my freshman year, have had a lot of successes, but that's really going to be my focus. And I look at myself as well, I just represent most of Henderson County. I look at myself as really representing all of Western North Carolina. We really need to stick together. And so I'll step down. The only thing I'd add is, Tom Apodaca thinks I'm hard to manage. You can imagine how hard it is to work with him. He leaves, he's got these big ideas, and then staff people like me have to clean up after him. So that's how it really works. Thank you.
And now, Representative Ray Rapp, Minority Whip. Next year, Ray, we'll reverse the order.
Oh, no. See, want to make a big bang while I'm up here. Let me just start out by saying I really enjoy working with the Western North Carolina delegation. It's when you've got the majority, you've got the person who's really in charge of what happens going on the Senate floor, and Tom Apodaca as a rules chair, and minority person, the minority leader. I'll get it out, folks. Give me a second. I banged my head just now. But then Martin Nesbitt, and And then as you go around the delegation that you see in front of us, Trudy and I were yesterday at the hospital hearing together, and I think there is a general sense among the delegation, Republicans and Democrats, that when it comes to what's important to Western North Carolina, we're going to be together, we're going to work hard, we're going to get it done. Now, having said that, I want to bring up one other thing because I want to keep this positive, but I'm going to make a couple of comments because there is, as a minority whip, I have to sit here and listen to some things that I think you need a different slant on, but I do want to mention one thing that Representative Fisher alluded to, and I think it's important. Between 2002 and 2009, our graduation rate went from a little over 64% up to 75% over that 7-year period in the state. And I think that reflected commitment to education, a special committee that Representative Fisher was one of the co-chairs of that addressed the issue of dropouts, which it continued to be a serious problem and is still a serious problem. We're only at 75%. That's slightly below the national average, but we're not there yet, and I think we need to get it. But I think it reflects the fact that what Senator Nesbitt was talking about in terms of this organization's commitment and this state's commitment to education has to be number one in consideration in our minds. And as we go into the fall election, and I'm a minority whip, folks, so I'm not going to apologize for that. But when we go into the fall election, I think this election is going to be about education. I think the central focus of this is going to be the cuts that were made in K-12 education. You can call it reform, you can call it whatever you want, but yesterday I sat through the Education Oversight Committee meeting to hear from 4 hand-picked superintendents from across the state who came in and just laid out the impact of these cuts on their school systems. And folks, size matters. When class sizes go up, teachers are lost. There's only one adult in a classroom because you've lost teachers' assistants. That is not promoting what I see as the critical need for economic development in our state, and that's education. Because if we're going to have a globally prepared workforce, we better educate these young people. And when we cut preschool by 20%, put 6,300 children on the street, not having services. By the way, an at-risk 4-year-old is only going to be 4 years old one time. They don't get the services this year. They're in kindergarten next year. They're already behind. We've dropped from 4th in the nation in terms of preschool early childhood programs to 11th this year, according to the Rutgers study that came out 2 weeks ago. Now, we got to pay attention to that. A $414 million cut to our state university system, which we pride ourselves on because of the research that you've heard about to help with it. A $414 million cut to the university system, the biggest cut in the history of the state of North Carolina, to me is unconscionable. Now, I used to chair education appropriations, and what you heard is over about a 3-year period prior to that, we took 10% out of that budget. And we made them squeal. But we went too far this time, and I will say this. When the Republicans were elected, they promised they were going to cut this temporary 1-cent sales tax. And they could go next fall and say promises made and promises kept, because they did. But when those taxes were taken off, that put an additional $1.3 billion hole in the budget, of which $1 billion of that 1.3 came out of education. Now, those are the kinds of things, folks, that I think we need to get behind, Republicans and Democrats. So I want to say this, not as, oh, this is a Democratic issue. This is Republicans and Democrats have to get behind our education system in this state. We've got to get back on track, support it. And one of my commitments going back down there is to help in any way I can, not just be the critic, but to try to help look at some of these issues. And when I look at people like Tom Abdock, I know I can get a voice. But I got to tell you, over on the House side, it's very hard for some of us to get the leadership's attention. And debate is cut off regularly, 35 times in 12 months. We've had the question called, and I'm going to just quantify it and then I'll close. Because I think you need to know what Susan and some of the others were referring to in our problem. In the previous 4 years, the question was called, in other words, debate was cut off 7 times in 4 years. In less than 12 months, we did it 35 times. That is not the way to promote cooperation and collaboration, problem solving. So these are the kinds of things that we're dealing with on the House side. And but I don't want you to think that I'm saying this about the colleagues in the room, because we really do. And I think Trudy and I sitting together yesterday, dealing with the hospital issue, I think was representative of how Western North Carolinians deal with these issues together. Thank you so much.
Okay, let's take a few minutes and open it up to the floor. And again, if you'll just introduce yourself, speak loudly or come to the microphone. Okay.
My name is Karen Craig Nolan. I'm the director of Riverlink, and I just want to thank the delegation for what they did to bring New Belgium and Sierra Nevada here. It really does prove that our environment is essential to our economic development, and thank you so very much.
Question?
Yeah, more of a comment, really. My name is Woody Eaton. I'm with Blue Ridge Biofuels. We make biodiesel here in Asheville, North Carolina. And I think it's time that the state got serious about biofuels. With the exception of the 5 producers in the state, we import all of our fuel. And that means billions of dollars are leaving this state for our fuel. And North Carolina is primed and ready for biofuels. We've got strong producers here. We're all growing, and we just need a little help. For example, when you look to other states like South Carolina, they have a biodiesel credit. So I can actually make more money selling my fuel into South Carolina than I can here in North Carolina. So I think it's time North Carolina got behind biofuels, and that was the first point I wanted to make. Second point is there's a bill that's being floated around in the state legislation, and that is what in the biodiesel industry we're calling the grease police bill. And it's a bill being presented by some of our competitors, or one of our competitors. They're dubbing themselves the North Carolina Renters Association, but they're headquartered out of Virginia. They won't allow any of the North Carolina biodiesel producers to become members, and they're trying to put regulation on grease collection, which is going to significantly impact our business and how we get our feedstock. So that's a bill to be aware of and to be concerned about. And then the final point I wanted to make was about the education component. And I'm from my personal perspective on the issue, my wife was a school teacher, and I say she was because she's now quit that job and is entering a new career path in the nursing field, mainly because the pay was not good enough for the stress she had to deal with. So something to consider. Thank you.
Would any comment from the delegation?
Somebody needs to comment, I'd say. Some of you others are going to have to jump up here. I don't want anybody to leave here thinking we don't care about what you just said. Any kind of alternative energy is on our front burner. It's the secret to us working our way out of the mess we're in this country. And I'm glad. Anytime you can do what you just did, you inform us and you help us, and I think everyone in here will be supportive of what you're doing. I plead that I don't know as much about your industry as I should, but now that I have some information, we'll get better informed and we'll look at those. And certainly, what you had to say about the teachers, I think everyone in here would agree with. In polling, I don't pay much attention to polls unless they tell me what I want to hear. But you can poll and say, can I raise your taxes to do A, B, C, D,